The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. The modern bourgeois society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonisms. It has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Capital is dead labor, that, vampire-like, only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. The time during which the laborer works is the time during which the capitalist consumes the labor power he has purchased of him. If the laborer consumes his disposable time for himself, he robs the capitalist. The more value he produces, the more his labor power develops, the more productive his work, the more he enriches the capitalist. And it is precisely this enrichment that strengthens the power of capital over labor. In direct contrast to German philosophy, which descends from heaven to earth, here we ascend from earth to heaven. That is to say, we do not set out from what men say, imagine, conceive, we set out from real, active men, and on the basis of their real life process we demonstrate the development of the ideological reflexes and echoes of this life process. Life is not determined by consciousness, but consciousness by life. Men must be in a position to live in order to be able to make history. But life involves before everything else eating and drinking, housing, clothing, and various other things. The first historical act is thus the production of the means to satisfy these needs. In a higher phase of communist society, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-round development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be fully left behind and society inscribe on its banners. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Capital therefore presupposes wage labor presupposes capital. They condition each other, each brings the other into existence. Does a worker in a cotton factory produce only cotton? No. He produces capital. He produces values which serve anew to command his own labor, to purchase new labor for the same exploitation. Capital is therefore not a thing, but a social relation between persons, established by the instrumentality of the worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces. The more powerful labor becomes, the more powerless becomes the worker, the more intelligent the work, the duller becomes the worker, and the more he becomes a slave of nature. Labor produces not only commodities, it produces itself and the worker as a commodity, and does so in the proportion in which it produces commodities generally. The hand mill gives you society with the feudal lord, the steam mill society with the industrial capitalist. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. Maintains his rights as a purchaser when he tries to make the working day as long as possible and, wherever possible, to make 2 working days out of 1. On the other hand, the worker maintains his right as a seller when he wishes to reduce the working day to one of definite normal duration. There is here, therefore, an antinomy, right against right, both equally bearing the seal of the law of exchanges. Between equal rights, force decides. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the demand for their real happiness. To call on them to give up their illusions about their condition is to call on them to give up a condition that requires. Men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly encountered, given, and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. And just when they seem engaged in revolutionizing themselves and things, and creating something that has never yet existed, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis they anxiously conjure up the spirits of the past. What constitutes the alienation of labor? First, that the work is external to the worker, i.e., It does not belong to his essential being. He does not develop freely his mental and physical energies, but is physically exhausted and mentally debased. The worker therefore only feels himself outside his work, and in his work feels outside himself. He is at home when he is not working, and when he is working he is not at home. His labor is therefore not voluntary but coerced. It is forced labor. It is not the satisfaction of a need, it is only a means to satisfy needs external to it. The misery of the worker is in inverse proportion to the power and size of his production. The modern state, no matter what its form, is essentially a capitalist machine, the state of the capitalists, the ideal collective capitalist. The struggle between capital and wage labor is concealed by the trappings of parliamentary debate and legal equality. But the real class war is constantly present, occasionally erupting in moments of crisis, when the illusion of harmony shatters and the naked antagonism appears, not as philosophy, but as barricades in the streets. The working class did not expect miracles from the commune. They have no ready-made utopias to introduce by decree of the people. They know that in order to work out their own emancipation, and along with it that higher form to which present society is irresistibly tending by its own economical agencies, they will have to pass through long struggles, through a series of historic processes, transforming circumstances and men. They have no ideals to realize, but to set free the elements of the new society with which the old collapsing bourgeois society itself is. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil, and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. Accumulation of wealth at one pole is, therefore, at the same time accumulation of misery, agony of toil, slavery, ignorance, brutalization, and moral degradation at the opposite pole. To the degree that the capitalist class accumulates, the working class must undergo a relative pauperization. The advance of industry, whose involuntary promoter is the bourgeoisie, replaces the isolation of the laborers, due to competition, by their revolutionary combination, due to association. The development of modern industry, therefore, cuts from under its feet the very foundation on which the bourgeoisie produces and appropriates products. What the bourgeoisie therefore produces, above all, is its own grave. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Relations of production never replace older ones before the material conditions for their existence have matured within the framework of the old society. Mankind thus inevitably sets itself only such tasks as it is able to solve, since closer examination will always show that the problem itself arises only when the material conditions for its solution are already present or at least in the process of formation. In broad outlines, Asiatic, ancient, feudal and modern bourgeois modes of production can be designated as progressive epochs in the economic formation of society. The bourgeois relations of production are the last antagonistic form of the social process of production. But the productive forces developing within bourgeois society create also the material conditions for a solution of this antagonism.